Our next guests say a new trend is emerging in both Toronto and Vancouver. More business owners are deciding to own rather than lease their office space. Joining us is Scott Chandler. He's Senior Vice President at Colliers International. And Steve Gupta is President and Chief Executive Officer at the Gupta Group. It's great to have you both here. Steve, let's start with you. What is driving this? First of all, is this limited to Toronto and Vancouver, or are we seeing it elsewhere in the country?
I think it'll be going elsewhere as well in the country. This is it makes much more sense to buy or own real estate versus leasing, and for a lot of small companies to medium companies, it makes much more sense for them to own their office space, because it gives them the stability of their rents, and they can borrow money at low interest rates. That's driving it, and the power of the location always helps them. Capital appreciation, as well as they'd never have to worry about moving, and they can fix the space as to their liking as they want, whereas in rental space they could be bumped out 5 years later. They don't want to invest that kind of money. So it's like it's an investment in the future of their business, same as when you buy a residence, investment in the future of your family. And real estate never goes wrong over a period of time. It always goes up. And if you have a great location, you attract better rental rates, you attract better prices, and convenience of the location being right on the subway, 4050 Yonge Street or Yonge Park Plaza is a great location in the North City. And
Scott, how new is this model, the so-called office condominium model?
Well, you know, when Colliers has tracked, it's been since around 2010 in Toronto and Vancouver. As Dr. Gupta was saying, what we're seeing is the ability to leverage, the ability to own, and the flexibility to own. It parallels the residential condominium market in a lot of ways. As an investor, I think you get to participate in the commercial real estate market just like REITs and large institutions have, and we've seen the good growth that they've enjoyed. And as a private investor, you have the opportunity to do that on your own property.
Now, there's lots of advantages, I guess, as Dr. Gupta was outlining, to owning, but I mean, I'm guessing a market like Calgary, if you've been going down this road, that would be a painful place to be today. Is that something that people worry about or talk about, or how does that factor in?
I think this is a long-term play. I mean, when you want to own your own business premises or invest for someone else to use it, I think you have to have a long-term view. And yes, Calgary's in a tough spot right now in the office market, but I think when you average it over the long term, it can be a very strong investment.
But at the same time, if you have already borrowed money at the long term, 10 years, your payments don't change. That makes a huge difference.
Right.
Whereas the rental versus owning, and the rent 5 years later, 3 years later, whenever the lease comes up, you have to increase the rates, or normally they go up.
How much of a factor have been rising lease rates? Are companies deciding, instead of paying these higher lease rates every year?
Normal inflation rates are going right now, it's a little bit lower, but normally it goes up 2 to 3% a year and 10-15% in 5-year lease. And whereas interest rates being hovering around 3 to 4%, most people can get 10-year money at 3.5% with a good credit rating. I think it makes tremendous sense for people to own. And it's been all over the world, especially in Europe. People can own their offices that you never have to worry about moving or bumped out because somebody else needs the space next door.
Now, in Toronto and Vancouver, do you guys see lease rates accelerating?
They have been in the last year. The market where Dr. Gupta is has gone up $1 in the last quarter, the asking rent.
Cool.
Vacancy rate's 3%. So it's very strong in that market, and I think both in Vancouver and Toronto, it's becoming more and more transit-oriented.
Right.
So those locations are critical.
The figures I see in a Colliers report suggest that 83% of recent buyers in Vancouver were investors. Is that to say that they're not actually occupying and using that space, but buying it as an investment?
Yeah, that's what that stat says. And Vancouver and Toronto over time is a very entrepreneurial market, as you know, with a lot of savvy investors, and they see it as an opportunity for capital gain and yield.
And how much foreign money, to get into the foreign money question, how much of that investment in Vancouver in office real estate is coming from foreign?
It certainly plays a part. We don't track exactly how much, but it certainly is part of it. And it has been in Toronto.
And it's much more muted in Toronto, 26%,
it is.
Right?
Yeah, 26% are investors in Toronto, according to our research, and it's more of a user market right now, and there's more users in Toronto than Vancouver as well.
How many office condominium projects or space is available right now in the marketplace?
We know in GTA there are probably 4 or 5, and there are some other in the works. Ours is the largest one, being on Yonge and York Mills. Right now, 250,000 square feet. It's overall 500,000 square feet of of the project, but there's a Hilton full-service hotel there as well, and retail. It's a combined services that makes a huge difference for office. That people can go for lunch, they can go for a drink, they can go for coffee, and all these mixed-use development makes a huge difference.
Okay, it's an interesting conversation. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sharing it with us. That was Scott Chandler. He's Senior Vice President at Colliers International, and Steve Gupta, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Gupta Group. Coming up, there's news that Delta Airlines is close to buying over 30 Airbus